Hi golfers, Nick here for Nick Taylor Golf. It's Friday, so welcome to another lesson on golf tips. This week on golf tips, I'm going to share with you the progress of this golfer. So this is a new golfer, complete beginner, going through the stack and tilt system here at GOLFTEC. So this is going to help you golfers out there that are new to stack and tilt or just new to playing golf. So we took him from a complete beginner to a pretty good golfer in just 3 months. So in today's video, I'm going to share with you the tips and tricks we use to help him play better golf. This golfer worked with me for about 3 months, and we did one lesson per week for 1 hour. Now, bear in mind this golfer didn't practice outside of his lessons, so you can just see what's possible over the course of 3 months. So we pretty much did 12 hours of coaching, and we're going to see the progress of this golfer. Now, we're not going to take a look at every lesson, but we're going to take a look at the key things that we did in those lessons to help him play better. Now, bear in mind, complete beginner. So we're going to look at, first of all, the original golf swing, which is here on the left-hand side. And as we progress, we're going to be going through the changes we made. So we always have to start somewhere. So you can see pretty much complete beginner. You can see as he moves here, his head moves, arms bend. As he comes down to hit the golf ball here, it's this one right off the toe, hits it into the GC quad there. So you can see that this golfer is a complete beginner. So where do we start? So first of all, when he came to this lesson, now I gave him a bit of help with his grip, a little bit with his stance. You can see he turns his feet out quite nicely. But from there, we started to work a little bit on, first of all, the head movement. So the first key thing that I identified here was the contact. We've got to make better contact. So first of all, the thing that starts to go wrong is how he moves his head. So you watch here, I've got this sway sensor on the screen there. You can see by the time he moves to the top of the backswing there, it goes red, which means that he's swayed away from the target. I see this quite a lot. He's actually keeping his chest down, and we're going to get into how we can move better to stop you swaying. Now, the first thing I wanted to do is really try and get him the feeling of staying quite centered and not moving the head. So you can see on the right-hand side here, I'm holding his head with that noodle. So if you watch the difference here, as we swing back, he manages to keep that head in that circle. We're starting to give him the feeling of how he should move in the backswing. There's still a lot to do. Look at the way we swing through here. There's a lot more to do in this finish position. But really, the start of this journey was really just to learn how to move differently, try and give this golfer the feeling of not swaying off the golf ball. This is quite an important part. You need to keep that head as steady as possible. Make sure you don't sway, because that's going to affect your low point, and it's going to reduce how much you can turn, and also going to give you more likely to bend these arms. I see this a lot where the golfer kind of sways off the golf ball, and then to get any sort of leverage and power, the golfer starts bending the arms. So this has a massive bearing on the contact and the low point of the golf swing. So lesson one, focused on the sway, just trying to keep that head steady, just to give him the feeling of not moving off the golf ball. So first lesson, bear in mind this golfer is completely new. Showed him how to hold the club. Then we started to work on his stance, and the stance is really key. So make sure when you set up, feet are turned out, knees are turned out, and then you get the center of your shoulders and the hips slightly stacked to the left. Then you're ready to kind of build a good golf swing from this position. Now, in this first lesson, we saw the golfer kind of bending his arms, swaying his head. So first thing we worked on was really trying to help this golfer stay centered in the backswing. As we go through the lessons, we're going to go into more detail in terms of how we got this golfer to move better. But initially in this first lesson was really just trying to get that golfer the feeling of staying centered in the golf swing. It's so important that when you swing, the more you move off the golf ball, the harder it is to control this low point. Remember, that first key fundamental is to hit the ground in front of the ball. So feet turned out, weight forward, keep the head centered, and move the weight forward into the finish is the first key thing you need to start to learn if you're working on the stack and tilt golf swing. We move into lesson two here. So it's very important when you're learning stack and tilt system and learning how to move better in the golf swing, how you tilt and bend. So we're going to take a look at how this golfer tilts and bends here, because on the left hand side, you can see this was at the beginning of that. This is the second lesson. This is literally 1 week later from that starting point. So as this golfer moves back here, okay, keeps his head in the circle, and it's not just about keeping the head in the circle, it's how you do it. So if we bring up some numbers here, his bend and tilt, and also his sway here of his hips. So I've just brought up onto the screen here the shoulder bend, which is 28 degrees forward. So that's referencing this sensor here being 28 degrees forward. Okay, so you can see that by moving the chest downwards, even though his his head is staying in that circle, he's not bending in the right way, which we're going to get into later. And then you can see also the tilt number there at 23. So that's the left shoulder tilt moving downwards. Now the best golfers on average, they tilt at 36 degrees. So we know this golfer needs to tilt better, he needs to bend better. Also, you can see how he moves his hips kind of towards the target here. So the way he's keeping his head in the circle is kind of in the wrong way, and this is so important. It's not just about keeping it in the circle, it's about doing it in the correct way. So if you take a look at the end of that second lesson, by the time we get to the top here, if we bring up some data and numbers, so you can see the numbers on the screen here. So first of all, just taking a look at the lower half, this is the hip sway. So we saw in the original swing, he kind of moved his hips towards, and that was his way of trying not to move his head. So in the after swing here on the right hand side, we've got his hips well under control. He's staying on that white line with his hips, and that's where you'd expect it to be. I've instructed him to kind of move his left shoulder down more and try and bend more backwards. Now the shoulder bend's not perfect here at 14 degrees forward, but it's a lot better than it was, and you can see the tilt there is almost 20 degrees more as well. So we're also going to take a look at this from the side view, just to give you guys a little bit of an idea of what this looks like from the side view. So when you're looking at your swing, you've also got to try and keep that head centered from the side view as well. This is why it's important to use two camera viewpoints here. So we saw the original swing on the left hand side, he kind of moved his hips towards the target, but managed to keep his head in the circle. Now take a look at from the side view, watch what happens here with his head position. So as he swings back here, he's not tilting his left shoulder downwards enough, so by the time he gets to the top of the swing there, you can see how his head position from this angle is actually moved away from the golf ball, yet from the front view his head looked like it was pretty stable. So this is why it's important to look at this from these different viewpoints. Now in his after swing here, you can see the difference in the tilt of the shoulders here. So in this particular swing here, we're looking at the tilt, which is referencing this angle here of the shoulders. On the left hand side there, you can see his shoulders were turning too level to the ground and his hips were moving towards the target to keep his head in that circle. So here we can start to see how this golfer is now tilting in the backswing with his shoulders to keep his head centered. We're also starting to change the way he bends his shoulders as well. So this was an important lesson. Coordinating the movements in the right order and sequencing them is so important in building a consistent golf swing in the right way to help you control that low point and hit better golf shots. So this is a key lesson because it's not just about keeping that head in the circle. We saw how this golfer, to keep his head in the circle, was kind of moving his hips away towards the target too much, and then from there it's very difficult then to move forward into the golf swing. We saw from the side view how the golfer was pulling his head away from the golf ball. So when you video your swing, it's important to get the camera from side view and front view to analyze what's happening. Like you might look at the front view, think, okay, you're keeping the head in the circle, but it's the way you do it. So in this particular lesson, we started to building the tilt. So this is the shoulder down move in the golf swing, which is key for the stack and tilt golf swing. It's key for every golf swing, right? Every golfer tilts in the golf swing. We know at GOLFTEC here that the average golfer tilts at 36 degrees. So this golfer was tilting at 23, was pulling his head away from the ball. He was moving his hips way too much towards. So now the weight forward in the golf swing is very important. So we've talked about stacking the hips and the shoulders forward at setup, but in the backswing you need to keep quite centered, and the hips will stay slightly to the left. Like when I set up here, I have probably 60-40 on the left with my left side here, and I'll maintain that in the backswing. And then from here, then I'll push that weight forward into the finish. This golfer was 60-40 at address, and then more like 80-20 with his lower body in the backswing. So it's important that you control the sway of your body, you learn how to move that shoulder down, learn how to extend and bend in the golf swing. This is going to be important for the progress in your golf. It's going to help you keep your arms straight, it's going to help you turn in the right way and control the low point. So this is a key lesson. Just keeping the head in the circle is not always the key thing here. You have to do it in the right way and move in the right way. So this lesson, I showed that golfer how to tilt properly, how to move his left shoulder down. So a good way to do this is to put the club across your chest and feel like that club points down at the golf ball. Now you can do this in a mirror, you can do this putting your head against the wall, but you have to learn how to tilt. This is going to help you tilt and bend and stay centered in the golf swing. So very important part of stack and tilt is the tilt, and that's going to help you control that low point. It's going to stop your head from moving around in the golf swing. So tilt down and then in the finish there's a tilt as well, but we'll get into that later. But first of all, this lesson was all about trying to learn how to tilt and bend to stay centered, and very important as well not to move that hip sway too much towards. You can see I always place a line on the right leg, and there should be slight daylight there in the backswing. It shouldn't be moving too much towards, and at the same time it shouldn't be moving through that line as well. So important to stay centered by tilting and bending the right amount in the backswing. So now we move on to the third lesson, and you can see here I've got the noodle set up on his head position there. We're also starting to keep working on his backswing, but now we're starting to work on his finish position. Notice the water bottle there just by his right foot, and this is a really good way of working on the body movement into the finish. Now, this lesson is all about building a better structure to the swing. So we saw in those original swings how from day one, the golfer moves his head away, bends the arms. Now, we're trying to keep his swing centered, we're trying to keep his head steady by tilting and bending. Now, we're trying to build in a better structure by keeping his arms straight. So at the beginning of this lesson was all about trying to keep his arms straight. So in the first swing of this lesson, you can see he's keeping those arms a lot straighter, but the club's not traveling far enough, so he's not going to get much power from there. So now we're starting to learn how to keep them straighter, but start to move differently. So we take a look at some data here. So taking a look at the shoulder bend here. So we know in the backswing, the best players extend their spine. So this sensor's located on the back of his shoulders here. On the right hand side, he's staying downwards 36 degrees, kind of moves his head, and it makes it very hard to make a full backswing without bending the arms, which is we're seeing from day one. Now we're starting to extend better and keep his arms straight. So this was a quite key lesson to help him keep his arms straight, try and build a better structure to the swing. Now let's take a look at the swing as we move now into the finish. So in this same lesson, we started to work a little bit on the finish position. So talked about that water bottle there just outside his right foot. So we take a look at the original swing, keeping his arms straight but not really bending and turning enough. Now watch his trail foot there, it kind of moves back. So by the time he finishes the golf swing here, you can see where his foot position was in relationship to that white line. That makes it very difficult to move the weight forward. So on the right hand side here, the instructions were to keep his weight slightly forward on the left and kind of move his feet and his trail foot there away from that bottle. So by the time we finish the golf swing here, if we take a look at some of that data, the key move here is the hip sway and the shoulder bend. So on the left hand side, you can see the shoulder bend is 4 degrees forward. So we talked about that in the backswing, but also it's important in the finish. So you can see on the right, he's extending backwards an extra 22 degrees, so 18 degrees backwards with the spine, but also the hip movement there and the right foot, so key. So it's very important in the golf swing that you keep moving your weight forward. It's important how you bend in the golf swing. This is going to help you keep your arms straight, build a much better structure to your golf swing. This lesson was all about trying to keep the golfer's arms straight and learn how to move his weight better into the finish. So we saw at the beginning of this lesson, the instruction was to keep his arms straight, and you could see how he could do it, but there was no distance to this left arm. It wasn't going to create much power from there. So we carried on learning how to bend and extend backwards. If I put my club in my chest here, you want that club to point horizontal to the ground in the backswing. We don't want that club to point downwards. That's going to restrict how much you can turn in the golf swing, and you see this a lot where if you stay in forward bend, you have to bend the arm to create any sort of power in the golf swing. So important to extend the spine. This is going to help you turn, it's going to help you keep your arms straight. So that was the focus at the beginning of the lesson, learning how to bend and keep these arms straight. And then from there, we worked on his finish position. This is the first time we started to work on the finish, and this is the hips tucked in the stack and tilt golf swing. The hips tucked is basically tucking the hips under the shoulders in the finish position, and we saw with the right foot how the foot was twisting back as he went through. So this was a very simple drill. You need a water bottle, place it outside of your right foot, and then from here you have to learn how to move your foot and bank it inwards as opposed to moving that heel back and knocking over the bottle. So once we learn how to bend, keep the arm straight, then we can start to work on the finish position. So as always in these lessons, I'll be recording practice swings. And this is important, right? If you can practice without a ball to start with, making sure you make these movements can be easier as soon as you put a ball there. So we did lots of practice swings. And then when we're ready, we started to try and learn how to bend, keep these arms straight, and then continue to move the weight forward into the finish. You can see here the position of my right foot. Okay? Sometimes my right foot will even slide forward. And sometimes that's a good feeling as well, trying to do the opposite. feeling that foot slide inwards is a good way of making sure you keep pushing your weight forward so that heel doesn't spin back and you keep your weight back in the finish. So now we move on to the next lesson. So far we've worked on tilting and bending and swaying to help this golfer improve. Now we're trying to provide a bit more detail and start to work on the swing plane. So every time we do a lesson here, we use the grid here at GOLFTEC to help golfers get a sense of where the hands and the club path should move. In this particular lesson on the screen here, you can see on the right hand side I'm still holding his head, so this is still something he's got to work on. Now I know a lot of you golfers out there, you feel sometimes some things will take longer than others, and that's true, right? This golfer was still, if you take a look at the left hand side here, he was still not quite bending and tilting in the right way, whereas now by holding his head here, it's keeping his head more stable. Now this is an interesting one. So we've got the noodle there. So the whole idea of this lesson was really keep his swing on plane. This is really key. You've got to, there's a number of things you need to do in a golf swing. You need to keep quite centered, move your weight forward. You also need to move your hands and the club on the right swing plane. This is vital for consistency, controlling the hand path, controlling the low point and the ball flight. So when you take a look at this original swing, now his left arm there is quite low. So the checkpoint here would be to get the left arm across the line of the shoulders. Now you'll start to see on the left hand side here how in the transition into the downswing, the shaft angle there is very steep. So the instruction here was to really try and get the shaft on the same angle as the noodle to try and train the swing plane. And then as we continue down, on the left hand side you can see the club moves outside of the top line, whereas on the right hand side it's kind of staying on plane between those two lines, and this was key, right? So it's interesting because his left arm's quite low here, but then he gets it very steep and moves outside of the plane line. And that makes it very difficult to be consistent and hit with any sort of amount of power. So on the right hand side here, you can see the difference in that transition coming down. Now, this was a completely different angle to the swing, and this is very key, right? When you're working on your swing, you've got to try and keep this on plane. Now, you might not always have access to a noodle. I know a lot of you golfers out there practice at home, you might have alignment stick you can set up, but really it's something you need to practice either in a mirror or on your phone, just checking that. But the angle of the golf swing is so vital here. Check the left arm at the top there. You can see in the original swing here, his left arm was too low, and then the club gets very steep and outside the plane. So this was a huge lesson really to really train the correct angle in the golf swing. This is vital for anyone wanting to play good golf. This next lesson was so key. So we started to get his arm straight, started to work on his finish position, but now we needed more detail into the swing and try and keep his swing on plane. So using the tour striker, plane station and the noodle, use this as a guide, right? And again, we did plenty of practice swings with this, trying to keep the club parallel to this. We saw in the original golf swing, the golfer's left arm was quite low, and then he got very steep, moved the club outside, off plane, off the grid. Very difficult to hit consistent shots doing that. So having something there as a guide, it doesn't have to be a noodle, it can be a alignment stick, anything really. Use a mirror and try and get the angle of the club parallel to that. When we set up to the golf ball, the club is on an angle. It's designed to swing on this angle. It's not designed to swing off plane. That would be off plane, being too steep. We're trying to swing around the body, back swing and follow through on the same angle as the golf club, and this is key. Practice swings, use video, use a mirror to see this, but in the lesson the instruction was to try and keep the club on the same angle, try and get the left arm across the shoulders at the top of the backswing, not too low. So if you can hit shots by keeping the club on the same angle as this, you're going to be not far away from keeping the club on plane and on the grid. So over the course of 3 months we had to try and put all those pieces together. I've highlighted all the key lessons we did, but sometimes we have to go back and revisit those things. So it's so important that you may think you've cracked something and you've done it, okay, I've stopped swaying and I don't need to worry about it anymore. That's not always the case. You've always got to keep an eye on this. This is why it's so important. You get feedback when you're practicing, when you're playing, because you need to see what's happening. So now we're going to summarize everything we've worked on. So as set up here, you can see the original swing we looked at earlier on the left hand side, compared to the latest one here on the right hand side. So let's just play these swings out to begin with, just to show you the difference between them. So on the left hand side you can see the movement of the golf ball, the arms flexing. You can see a big difference in the speed of those swings. I'm playing these swings and you can see the difference in the kind of the speed as well, right? This golfer on the right hand side here, he starts the swing later and hits the ball before the golfer on the left, so which is also increasing the speed. So to put all these things together, we had to, first of all, at setup, we worked on just widening the stance, making sure the feet are flared out. We worked on trying to keep his weight a little bit more to the left-hand side, and then as we moved into the backswing here, as we get to the top, we can see the difference here in the way the head moves, the way the shoulders bend. Now this is quite key. We talked about the shoulder bend earlier. Now look at the difference here if we bring up these numbers. So you can see in the after swing, the golfer's shoulder bend is now at 0, and this is bang on where the tour average is. This is really going to help you golfers out there keep your arms straight and keep your head in the circle, so you can see the difference in the sway and how this golfer keeps his arms straight in the back. So let's take a look now at the difference in the downswing here. So in the original swing, you can see the arms are bent, the golfer keeps his weight back as he hits through, and now you can see him moving his hips forward and his weight forward into the finish. And the difference here was the contact and the low point, which is the first key fundamental of stack and tilt. So you can see as he goes through here, the club on the original swing misses the ground, hits the ball of the toe. This one here gets that low point in front, moving his weight better. And this was key, that lesson we worked on by moving his hips more towards the target. We worked with the water bottle, making sure his foot didn't move back. So you can see in the original swing, there was no real turn or power, kept his weight back in the swing. Now he's starting to move it forward there into the finish. So huge difference there over those lessons, over those period of time for this golfer to improve his golf. So just to summarize, guys, you heard me talk about the 10 words of stack and tilt before. So the 10 words are weight forward, shoulder down, hands in, arms straight, hips tucked. And you can see the progression for this golfer using those 10 words over the 3 months that we worked together. Now, bear in mind, I picked out 5 of the key lessons there. But we actually worked on this for 3 months. We did 1-hour lessons every week, so a total of 12 lessons. Now this golfer didn't hit golf balls in between lessons, but I would give him drills to work on. I think that's so important that you have something to feel. At home he had a small club he could practice with in the mirror, keep his head against the wall, and that's so important when you're learning. You have to keep practicing these movements, even if it's not hitting golf balls. I teach a lot of people and I say just repetitions, head against the wall, or just practicing some certain movements that you're trying to feel in the golf swing. The more times you get those repetitions and coordinate it, the better. And I think the key point here was that over those 3 months that we worked together there, you could see that the transformation from a complete beginner, but also I see this with a lot of golfers that I work with, there's always things you have to keep revisiting. So even though I picked out the 5 key things, some of those things we worked on for more than 2 lessons. So sometimes we'd have to go back to it, or sometimes we'd have to keep working on it the next week. And that happens sometimes. You do something once doesn't mean that you've cracked it, you've got to keep doing it. Important to video swing. Try and get in contact with a stack and tilt instructor or a GOLFTEC instructor to help you get better. You can see the importance of the 3D motion that we use here and the cameras from both viewpoints. That's key for you to understand your golf swing and to improve. So thanks again, golfers, for watching the video. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up, that really helps me. If you've got any questions on that or anything that's kind of helped your progress, I think that's important, put it in the comments below. I know a lot of you golfers do interact on there, and sometimes some things that you've gone through or something you're working on the stack and tilt system can help someone else. So post your comments in the box below, and I'll see you again next week for another video.